Right, now we've done the functionality, let's look at how we can do some further formatting to this, and also how we can just put some visuals on here to help the interaction and also printing of this view. So at the moment I have to go into, in fact I don't like the way this looks, I'm going to change the way this looks here. So again, I'm just going to format so these stand out. So again, select them, I'm going to make them just calculation, and yeah, that looks a bit better. I'm going to make them grid lines though, a bit darker, like so. Okay, so yeah, I like that. That's the way that looks a bit better. So what I need to do here now is, whilst I know what these mean here, I think it's, and also what's driving the start date, I want that to be more obvious when I'm printing this information off. So I want a key. So one of the things that I did was to make this column here. So we've got this, I just wanted to make this a little bit bigger, and this column here, I don't actually need that, I don't need that row, so I'm going to right click and I'm just going to delete that row because I don't need it. And again, don't need that. Right, and delete that. There you go. Right, so I've just got this one row here, and I just want to make this again a little bit bigger so I can see for now. So I want some things to appear in here. So I want to know what the week starting date is. So I'm going to use some dynamic pictures. I also want to know what the key is as well. So I want a key, so I know what these are, and I also want to know what my start date is, and I also want the ability, instead of having to go in here and change the date each time, I want to be able to change it and interact with it here as well, but not necessarily have it printable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this back to name, just check it still works, and I am going to first of all put this key in here. So, which is one of the reasons why I copied this across, is I'm going to turn it into a visual key. So let me just format it and get that done right now. And then if I take this and do a control copy, because I've got no grid lines in here, I do control copy and go to here, and then I right click and I want to do a paste. I want to paste a linked picture like so. So now I can make that a little bit smaller if I want to, and I can just put it there like so. So I've now got a key against this. Is that right there, the green? I go into that and I make that a darker green. To that, and go back to the 2-week rota. It's changed it, and there you go. Then I want to have the week starting date. Now, at the moment, this is driven off that date there, but I want this date. So if I take this and I just copy that, and then if I then just paste that like so, so I've got this date here is, and again if I control copy and I paste here again a linked picture, there it is, and we put it there. So I've now got my link there, So let's just pause and let me just explain, or take a moment to explain, why I'm using a linked picture and how useful these things are, and why I'm using them. So sometimes you may want to display information in your spreadsheet that doesn't necessarily fit neatly within the layout of your columns and their width and the row heights, etc. And you want to display some information. Now, say for example, I wanted to display this over a number of columns or smaller, is I can take this. So if I just take the view off here, take the grid views off for a second, I take this and I do a control copy and I paste it here as a linked picture. I'll make that smaller, for example. Is then whenever this changes, is dynamically this will change. So if I make that A, you'll notice the picture, because it's linked to this and linked to this range here, is it changes dynamically whenever I make a change here. So whenever my spreadsheet's calculating or doing something to change this, this is then being manipulated. It's dynamic because it's a linked picture. And that's what I'm doing with the 2-week rota, is I'm making the start date dynamic. So whenever I use the spin buttons that I'm going to add and it changes that start date, the picture will reflect the current adjusted date. If I make changes to the key, then the key will change dynamically as well based on that link, but also I can shrink that key down just to fit within one cell when that key, the actual information is over, say, 6 cells, and I can shrink all that down and link it to a dynamic picture. So hopefully that explains how I've used the linked picture and how useful it is. When you make changes to that, it will automatically change and reflect the latest state of that range it's linked to. Hopefully that's explained the linked picture. Now we're going to create some spin buttons for the user to interact with and scroll through the date periods. However, I need to create a formula first for those spin buttons to interact with, which will then influence the spreadsheet. So let's do this. I want this to change based on some settings. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put over here a formula, so I'm going to put 0, and then I'm going to put a 7, and then I'm going to put a total value here. So this is going to be 0. So let's move that down to there. So that's adjust, days, total, adjust. Yeah, so that's going to equal that times that, and return. And what I'm going to do is say, right, this equals if that does not equals 0, then that, else it equals that plus that. Yeah, and return. Now, so, and as far as my static data, that there equals that plus that. Okay, if I put 2 week rota adjust like so. So what that means then is if I put a 1 in here, it then moves that value. If I put a 0 there, it then moves it automatically. But I want it to do it dynamically. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little interaction here. So on the developer tab, and if you can't see the developer tab, just go File, Options, and then Customize Ribbons, and over here just make sure the developer tab is ticked here to make sure it's available. And I'm going to go Insert, and I'm going to put on here spin buttons. So I double click on that, and then I'm going to draw spin button like so. I'm just going to move it so it's there, and I'm going to right click on it and format the control. So as far as the control is concerned, I'm going to put maximum value is 52, and it does increments by 1. Current minimum value is 0, and the current value is 0, and I'm going to link it to this cell and return. So just to recap, the current value is now linked to the cell, the adjust cell. So when that cell adjusts, it will influence the current value. The minimum value is the range, as in we want to go down to 0, from 0 up to the maximum value, which is 52, and 52 represents the number of weeks in a year. And each time we click the button, we will increment the change by 1. So hopefully that makes sense on how we've associated these settings to how the user will scroll through the time periods in this 2-week view. And as far as my properties and protection, is it's not locked, and the properties, I don't want it to be a print object, and I'm going to leave it like so. And if I then click off there, now watch what happens when I do this. Watch what happens to this and what happens to here. So if I do up, that date changes, and also the view changes. If I go down, it then changes back again. If I go up, 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 down, down, down. So ultimately I can move, and if I can move this stuff, and if I take this and just move it down 1 and just type here so I know what these are: master start. Because if I change that, that means it's when the whole spreadsheet's starting from. In here I can adjust it like so, yeah, and there you go. Now to recap, we have our 2-week rota visual. I've put these spin buttons on to allow me to move through the different periods like so. Over here on the right, I put a formula to say that interacts with that spin button. So this spin button or buttons is connected to this cell. So when I make a change, click here, it increments it by 1. And this formula here is taking that and multiplying the number of days in a week to give me an adjustment value. In other words, to switch it and move it forwards to the next Monday of the week, or the next 2 Mondays, based on my master start date, which is the 23rd of October. Now if I change that to the 30th of October, then obviously this changes accordingly. This is my baseline, this is my start point. So if I put that back to the 23rd, so that scenario is, right, I'm doing my new rota for the start of the year. So you put it to the 1st of January or whatever the first Monday in that year when you start back to work. You can adjust that here, and then the whole idea is within the 2-week rota is that you can adjust it with this spin button. And if you wanted to reset it back to the master start date, i.e. this start date here, at the moment I physically have to either click all the way back. So if you've gone, you know, if I've gone all the way here, me being lazy, I don't want to have to click all the way back to get it back to the start point. And just from an aesthetic and look, I don't like the idea of this being visible and me having to just go 0 like so. I want to do it a little bit more, a little bit fancier, a little bit more user friendly when people are interacting with my spreadsheet. So to do that, I need to delve into the world of macros. Don't panic, this is not going to be heavily programming or macro orientated. It's just going to be one button that I'm going to put there, and I want, when I click that button here, I want to be able to just reset the value back to 0, so I don't have to click all the way through here or leave this visible. Now the value that I want to set is this value. I want to set it back to 0 when I hit the reset button, and that, with that selected, is cell AJ4 on this active sheet. That's what I want it to do. But for me to be able to use a macro, I need to save this file under a macro enabled format. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to go File, I'm going to save a copy, and I'm going to keep the name the same. In fact, I'm just going to put macro enabled for reference, like so. And here I'm going to change this from this XLSX extension here, an Excel workbook. I'm going to do the drop down and I'm going to save it as a macro enabled workbook. So I'm going to select the XLSM extension, select, and then save. It's just reminded me, because I'm on OneDrive, and I assume that you would be on OneDrive as well, it's just telling me that the auto save function will be on and it will automatically save this information. And I'm just going to go, yep, got it, and there you go, it's auto save. I can switch that off, which means then I would have to manually remember to click save, but I don't want to do that. I like the idea that it's constantly saving the information for me, or saving my updates. So I've now saved it as a macro enabled file. So this is my target here. So AJ4, that's what I want to change. So I'm going to go to the developer tab again. I'm going to do insert, and I'm going to select button, a button control. And then I'm going to draw it out here, like so. Now it's, give it a name. So this is reference to what this button is called. It's going to be in this workbook, not anywhere else. It's just for this workbook. So I'm just going to change the macro is in this workbook. That's what it's searching for. But I'm not going to do anything else in here. I'm just going to click OK. I've made that change. I'm going to click OK. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just delete the button 23, and I'm going to type reset, so I know what that button does. Then I'm going to click off it. Now when I click that button, it doesn't do anything because there's no macro assigned to it. So I'm going to create a very simple macro here, and the way that I'm going to do that is I can click on, right click on any of these tabs here. I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to view code. Now, so in the code window, I've got my objects here for this particular file here, macro enabled. I've got sheet 1, which is static data, sheet 2, etc. Now, down here, we've got the properties here. Now, if I close that down, and if you've just got a blank like that, the way to get that properties window up is if you go into view here, and I do properties window, it should appear like so. And that's the property windows for whatever you've got selected up here. So against this worksheet, I'm going to insert a module. So up here, see this icon, insert user form. I'm going to do the drop down arrow, and I'm going to select module, not user form, not class module. I'm selecting module like so. And now I can see there's my module that it's created, and I've got a module here called module 1. I'm just going to rename that module and call it MC reset, just so I know what that is. Now with this module selected, I just double clicked on it. You can see now on the right hand window, this is the code window. Don't panic. This is what we're going to type to get this to do a reset. So remember, the actual cell, so if I click the Excel button here to go back to my view, Excel view, this is the value that I want to change, AJ4. Yeah, so if I just change that to a value, so it's 4, I've got AJ4 there. If I go back to my code window like so, and I'm going to type sub, then I'm going to give it the macro a name. So I'm identifying, I'm going to do a routine here. So I'm going to do reset underscore, because you can't have any spaces in the name of it. Reset start date, and then hit return. So it's now created this sub. This is the name of the macro that it will be referred to, and then I've got an end sub here. And then all I'm going to type in here is one line of code. So I'm going to type active sheet. So in other words, whatever sheet is active, that's where I want this to operate. And obviously it's always going to be the 2-week rota sheet, sheet 4 over here. Then I'm going to do a dot, full stop, and I'm going to type range. And I'm going to do an open bracket. Now, whenever you're referring to a range, you need to put it into quotation marks. So I'm going to go open quotation marks, AJ4, close quotation marks, close bracket, then I'm going to do a full stop and then type value equals 0. And that's it. If I do return. Now, within Visual Basic, it's always good to put a little note. So I'm just going to put a note here. So I'm going to do apostrophe icon there and just type resets start date on the 2-week rota sheet. There you go, and it'll then go green. It recognises it as just a note, so I know what that's doing there if I ever want to look back at this. Now I can check to make sure this is not that it works, so I'm just going to do a debug, compile. It's not come up with any errors and it's fine. So if I hit save, then I can close that Visual Basic window down. I'm now back at my Excel. Okay, now all I need to do is right click on this button and assign macro. And here you can see it within this particular workbook, there's that macro that we've just written. So if I click that and click OK and then click off it, it's now assigned it. So if I hit reset now, and then moves it back to start date. So again, if I go click the buttons like so and hit reset, perfect. Now I'm just going to, again, the OCD in me, I'm just going to move this down slightly. It's all aligned. So I've now got my up arrow, I've got my down arrow, and I've got my my reset button here as well. Now what I want to make sure here is I don't want these to appear when I print this out as a rota. So I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to format my control. Now within the properties, there you go, it's not ticked, and I'm just going to leave the rest as is and do OK. I'm then going to right click on the reset button and look at format control, and again it's not ticked. So that means then what's visible to us here while we're working in the spreadsheet is if we print this, then it won't be visible on the print, and that's exactly what I want. So click OK. So now that I've done this and I've got all the interactions the way that I want it to work, I'm going to hide these columns. Now before I do hide the columns, there's something here that I want to make sure of, is I want to protect this, because really there's no data entry. All the data entry is going to happen on the team rota, the team data and static data. So I don't want people accidentally typing in here and ruining all the hard work we've done in building the formulas. So the way that I'm going to do that is, first of all, is I'm going to select the whole sheet by clicking up here, and then I'm going to right click and I'm going to set the default protection. So if I switch the protection on, I'm also going to hide the formulas as well. So if I click that, when I turn on protection on this sheet, it will hide the formulas. So I've got it ticked and that ticked as well. So locked and this hidden ticked, and click OK. Then specifically, I'm going to select the fields that I want not to be protected when I turn the protection on. So I want them to be able to change this drop down here. So I'm going to right click on that, format cell, and on the protection I'm going to take the unlock off like so and click OK. And then over here I want to make sure this is not protected so it can be changed. So again, right click on this cell, this adjustment, format cells, and again I'm going to take that lock off, click OK. Now that I've done that, I'm going to hide those so they're not visible. Don't need them to be visible anymore. And then finally, I'm going to look at these buttons. So right click, format control, and on the protection, just make sure it's not locked. And again on here, right click, format control on the reset button. And again, just click that so it's locked. And I don't want them messing around with the text, so leave that as locked also. And then click OK. So now when I turn on protection on the review ribbon and do protect sheet like so, I'm not going to put a password in there, because if I type in here it won't allow me to overtype it, but I can move it like so, and I can reset it back to the beginning, and I can change this to a skill or by name. But I can't change anything else anywhere else in that, and that's exactly what I want. So perfect. So I'm going to unprotect the sheet again because I need to look at the printing of this. So if I unprotect this, now up here on your quick buttons, I've got print preview and print. So if I click that, I can see the print preview, and this doesn't look particularly great. So I'm going to click the back arrow here and go back. Now if you can't see this, the way that you do it is if you click this here to customize, you can see at the moment if it's not there. Again, if I do the drop down and I click this here, make sure it's selected, it's then available to me. The other way that I can look at this information and look at what's going on, you can see now what it's doing. It's telling me how Excel is breaking up the print preview here. So I want to change this, and to do that I'm going to go to page layout, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the orientation because I want it to print it in landscape. So I'm going to take orientation, set to portrait, I'm going to do it to landscape. And you can see it's moved these slightly here where Excel is going to break it up. I want to insert a page break here. So I'm going to insert a page break. So I want it to print the first week, then on the next page, print the second week. So I'm going to select this column here that aligns here. Then I'm going to do page breaks, insert page break. So now you can see this line here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my print area. So from here, I take it to the top. That's what I want to print, like so. And I'm going to set my print area. So now what we can see is the page break I've inserted here, the page break where it prints up to based on the print area that we've selected. And what I can notice here is if you look over here, you can see that this is slightly cut off based on printing. So if I take this and select it, and I'm just going to use my right arrow key just to move it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select that. I hold down the control key and select that. And then what I'm going to go over here is with those selected, I'm going to align. So here, I'm going to align to the left on the page layout. So it's align. That's just align these again, the OCD in me here. So now if I look at a print preview here of that and see what it looks like. So now I've got this showing, this all looks nicely aligned. If I go to, I've got 3 pages, so let's see what it's doing. Yeah, don't like that. So let's go back arrow. So I need this dotted line to disappear. And the way that I'm going to do that is by playing around with the scale. So I'm going to make the scale smaller until this dotted line. So what should happen as I reduce it, this should move to the right. So I want to keep doing it until it disappears. So I'm going to click down the down arrow on the scale on the page layout. Okay, again, and there you go. So 80%, that now looks fine. And if I then do print preview, I've now got 2 pages, so that looks fine. I've got my first week there, that's great. Do the second week. However, I don't know who it's referring to, and I'd like the key and I'd like the start date as well to show on here. So again, go back, and on the page layout, I'm going to click the print titles here. So I want to repeat these rows when I'm printing, and I want to repeat these columns when it moves over to the page. And the way that I'm going to do that is, so the repeat rows, I'm going to click that, and then I'm going to, so I want to repeat these rows, so I'm going to take that and then just drag it all the way up to the top, do return. I'm then going to do the same for the columns, select that up arrow, and I want it to repeat from here all the way to column B. And I'm going to do input that. And if I do the print preview there, which is the other way you can do a print preview, but I'm going to caution you against that in a minute, is now when I look at my print preview, it works fine. Now, there's a few other things that we could do, which I think is good practice. So I wanted some titles on there. I also want to know what the source file is, where this data's been taken from, and I also want to know what page I'm looking at when I'm looking at this. So if I go back to print titles on the page layout, and then if I go to header footer tab, and I'm going to go to custom header, and I'm going to type in here 2 week rota. I'm going to put change tips and tools. Any opportunity to plug the channel. And click OK. I'm then going to go to custom footer. Now I've got these two things I can insert. So the current page number and then what the total page number of the print range is. So I'm going to type in here, so I'm going to click the writer section, type page, and do a space, click this, space, type of, and then space again, total number of pages. So page of pages. And I'm going to, on the left section, I'm going to type source, colon, space, and then just select this Excel here, which will put the file name there for me automatically, and click OK, and then click print preview. So now you can see we've got the 2-week rota, change tips, we've got the key so we can see what's going on, we can see how it's been sorted, we can see the start date that we're working from here, and we can see the source, and it's page 1 of 2. And if I click to the right again, I can see the names, the second week, and again I can see the source, etc. Perfect. That's exactly what we want. So you could, in theory, now I could just protect this, go to review, protect the worksheet, and it's now ready to go. However, the print range, it's fine, but if I add somebody to the team, so if I add Billy Joel, failed as a singer-songwriter, is now a receptionist, 37.5 hours. I go to my 2-week rota. You can see Billy Joel is included in there. So if I go to print preview now, you can see something's not right here. Billy Joel is there, but if I go back to the Excel spreadsheet, you can see Sharon, the office manager, Sharon Widget, the office manager, real name will remain unknown, is being cut off when I do the print preview. So that means then I'm going to have to reset the print range by going to print layout, reselecting this up to from here all the way up, and adding and setting that print range. Now again, if I don't want to do that and I'm happy with all the other settings, is what I can do is use a dynamic print range. Now when I say caution on the page layout, is when you're creating dynamic print ranges, every time you go into here and do print preview from here, it will reset the print range back to its automated view, i.e. What the last setting was. So it removes the dynamic functionality, and I'll demonstrate that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into formulas, and I'm going to go into name manager. And again, I'm going to type another formula in here. So if I go into the print area, so that's our print range here, and you can see there. So if I just copy that for a second, control copy, then I'm going to do new. I'm going to call this a new named range. So I'm going to call it print underscore area underscore formula. That's what I'm going to call it. Yeah. And then in here, I'm going to type a reference. So I want this here to look at something, and I'm going to use the offset function. And the offset function is, it has some elements that are really useful in dynamic ranges. So when you can't refer to a table, where this is not a table, then I'm going to fall back on the offset function. So I'm going to do offset, open bracket. Now my reference point is going to be B1 here. So I'm going to B1, so again it needs to refer to this sheet, so here, and I'm going to change that to a B. So that is my start point. So let me just type out this formula in the offset function utilizing the COUNTA function, and once I've done it I'll walk you through what I've done, and then I'll explain the offset function and the COUNTA function in a little bit more detail for you. Bear with me. Now if I click OK, let's have a look at this formula. If I click on this now, you can see that it's now capturing this area. So just to explain how I'm using the offset function to create a dynamic range. The first part of the argument is the reference point, cell B1. I'm then not using the offset row function, which is how many rows I want to offset from the reference point, and I'm not using the offset column argument either, which is how many columns to the right or left from my reference point. But I am using the second part of the offset function, which is a range selection. So the COUNTA function I'm using to count how many values in column B, so a range, so from B5 to B100, how many values or text values have I got in that column. So in this instance it will count 12. Then remember I want to include the row from row 1 down to row 16, so what I need then to do is add the number of rows I'm not counting with the COUNTA function to that number, which is 4. So that's row 1, 2, the hidden row, and then row 4. So I add that to that COUNTA total, so that's 12 plus 4 gives me 16. And then as far as the column part of that range argument, I'm asking it to include 32 columns, and I'll show you in a minute how I got that count of 32. So that's how I'm using the offset function to create a dynamic range, and it's all based on what that COUNTA function is doing. Hopefully that explains it. So on the offset function, let's use this blank Excel file just to try and explain how the formula works and the elements of the formula. So if I add some references in here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 1, 2, and then just copy that down as a series like so, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that equals that. Again, remember the absolute piece, so I'm going to make this fixed column. I want the row to be relative. And then I'm going to copy that all the way down, so I've got all these duplicating this over here. So if I do an offset function, is if I do equals, and this is fundamentally what we're doing here on the print range, the dynamic print range, is if I do offset here, and my cell reference is going to be D4 here, the number 1, and then if I want to select a range, is that the first thing it's asking me, if I wanted to say, for example, from here offset it and pick up the value below it, is the way that I would do that is I would do 1. I don't want to move the column. If I do a 0 and then just close the bracket, it'll then give me the number 2, because that is an offset of 1 row below. If I put an A here, header, if I want to go the opposite direction, I can do -1, and it'll pick up the value above it. And the same works for the column reference here. Now, if we take our print example, is what I've done is I've said, right, I want a as far as this is concerned, I don't want to move the columns, but I'm looking at an area. So what's the height of the area? So if I take this as far as how many rows do I want to select from here, from this reference, so that's 12 rows. So if I say 12, I then do a comma, and I want to know the width. So from here, it's 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so 1, 1, 2, 3. I'll do a 3 and hit return. You can then see what it's picking up. So it's picked up A here. It's picked up these numbers here. It's picked up the blank column, so it's just set that to 0, and it's picked up the first column. So if I go into here and I adjust this to be, so I've got the row, but I want it to start from here. So instead of 0, I want to go 1, 2. Yeah, so I do a 2, and then I want to pick up an area of 2 columns, so that including that, so I go 2 and hit return. You can then see it's grabbing all that information, and what I could do is I could put in here and wrap a sum around that. If I do sum, it's then adding all the numbers up in that area just by using that offset function. So if I get rid of the sum piece here, yeah, is that fundamentally that's what we're telling the print, how we're using the offset function and using the area, the height and the width based on relative to the position reference. So in our print range, it was from B1, is that we were selecting a number of rows, and all we were doing was doing a count A. Now if I take this here and we make this A, B, C, if I go A, so remember count A will count any cell that is not blank. Like so. And if I just make that 1, again 1, and I'm going to go that equals that plus 1, and because I've not fixed anything, I'm just going to leave it like so, and then I should be able to just take that and copy that all the way down, and then I've got my numbers again. Now if I do a count A here, so if I do equals count A, and I select all these rows here, it's giving me a count of the text that it's found. I've then got 2 blank rows there. So if I get rid of from D2, because I do D4, sorry, I'm then doing a count from D4 down to here, and it's picking up 12 text values, right? Now at the moment in here I'm saying 12, so all I do is just take this, control copy, which is what we're doing with the count A formula, and I replace this 12 where I put the 12 in manually, and I just put the count A in there and do return. It then dynamically does the same thing. So if I add 13, so if I add some values down to here, and then I add a copy of these down again, it should dynamically increase that range like it's doing with our print range. So if I copy that down, right, so I've got the count A to D15. So if I change that to say 100 or 1000 even, right, it's now picking that up. And again, if I just take this, drag it down, take this and drag it down, you can see it automatically picks it up because it's counting that range, and it's dynamically adjusting that number, that height for me. And that's what we are doing. That's what we're doing with the print range. Hopefully that helps explain how we're using the offset function and using the countafunction as well. Now the way that I counted the columns is I just selected from column B, then dragged all the way along across, and as you can see at the top right, as I drag it across, you can see the column count there. That's all I did. Now let me explain the problem with the page layout and the print preview so you understand a little bit better what I was referring to earlier. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this formula here before I click close. I'm going to do Control Copy, and I'm going to click the print area, and I'm going to paste that in there also. Do tick, and again that should be fine. You see it's done it. If I do close, now if I do print preview, it's fine, and that's fine. If I go back, close that. If I go to team, let's add another person, Eddie Murphy, junior vet. I'm going to do 25 hours like so, and I go to my 2-week rota. You can see there's Eddie. Let's sort it by skill set so I can see them all together. Yeah, I can now see them all together like so. And if I then do print preview, yeah, you can see it's got everybody on there and it's included them all. So down to Jane Smith there's Jane Smith. Now if I go to page layout, and at the moment if I go to formulas and we look at the name manager and we can see the print area, and this is the reason why I created a separate name range here, because this will happen. And if you want to restore it, you don't want to remember how to do this going forwards. But you'll notice it's got the offset function there. Now the offset function at the moment, it's taking it to 17, right? So if I go into here and I go page layout and I do print preview like so, it's all fine. But if I go to the formula manager now, having done that, and do name manager, and I don't know why it does this, hopefully Microsoft will fix it, but you can see now the print area has now reset the formula to be down to 17. I don't know why it overwrites that. So that's what I'm saying, when you are that's why it's best to write it here, take that, copy, and then I can just reset it back to what it was. So I think only use, I'll do the tick, and that's all good and that's all fine again. Only use the print layout and the print preview in the layout when you're doing that, when you are first setting it up or you need to make some changes. And that's why I've written that separate formula in that name range, so you can just copy and paste it and put it back in again. So now I'm going to, on the review tab, protect the sheet so people can't type in here. The only other thing I'm going to do now is I'm just going to organise these tabs based on how we would work with it. So I'm going to take this, move it to the right. I'm going to put my rota data there, and I'm going to put my team data there, and there's my static data. And there you go. We've now completed our 2-week team rota. So let's recap. We've now completed all the elements of our team rota. We have created spin buttons to enhance the user experience so they can scroll easily through the time periods in our 2-week rota view. We have created a print preview so they can print out this team rota view, and it's got some useful information. So it's got a meaningful title, we know what the source is, and also how many pages are in that rota view. And also we've made sure that we've got a key so people know what the data means on there, and that the column headings and the row headings repeat over multiple pages. We've also made the print range dynamic by combining both the offset and the COUNTA functions within the print preview name range. So when we add data, the print range automatically expands to include that information. And finally, we've added some protection to our 2-week rota view, and this will prevent any unwanted user mistakes, i.e. stop them overwriting the formulas within that view. Now, what's coming next? In the next and final chapter, we are going to make some amendments based on user feedback with some minor changes. We're also going to add some advanced visual basic protection to protect those formulas within the team rota data table. And also I'm going to add a bonus piece which I'll show you how to add a mini date picker to our team rota data table to further enhance that user experience. So I hope you found this video informative and helpful. I wish everyone a wonderful day, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye bye now.